After nearly a year of waiting, we now know the name, the launch date, and the size of USL's First Division League. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome officially USL Premier.
Which we predicted, right? I mean, we weren't the only ones. We can't claim that we were like the only people to believe it was going to be USL Premier, but there it is. They fall directly in line with the Jake Edwards original idea of naming their leagues after the English leagues. Jake no longer with USL, but he was the guy in charge when they decided to go with Championship and League One. And I think we probably should have known at that point, Rob, like we should have known there was going to be a plan to put a league on top of the Championship, because why would you willingly make yourself sound like a second division league when maybe you're not in direct competition with MLS, and that's obviously a thing that people talk about, but you're certainly not in partnership with MLS. USL and MLS are two different things. So why wouldn't you give yourself a chance to call your top level Premier or whatever? So will they call it Premier? Will it be like, oh, I'm really excited about the Premier season this year? Is that what we're going to say?
I wonder if people are actually going to adopt Premiership as like in England.
No, we're not that pretentious, are we? That's
I don't know. It is a little bit of a I don't know if paradox is the right word, but like this effort by USL is trying to push the American soccer landscape forward by using the English naming isms, which are a little odd anyway, which will also need further explanation to the new American audience, which they are trying to.
Right, which is when we look, I know this is not the news. The news is Premier, and we're going to get to some details that USL has dropped, or, they feel like details. Are they actually meaningful in any particular way? I'm not sure. But the fact that the third division of USL's structure is called League One is absolutely going to be confusing to some people. Absolutely, it's going to be confusing.
Because League One, Championship, and Premier could all mean top.
They could all mean top. And League One sounds like the top, but then you're right. That's exact. And again, I don't love the idea that we're just copying England's structure for the naming of this, but this is what they're going with. And this is a development after the original declaration of intent back in March of 2025 that they were going to launch a First Division League. Now, here are some details, and I think what's not included in this graphic that USL put up on their website is the number of teams. And Rob, I know you have that information in front of you, so I will ask you to pass that along in a second. But it says the future USL men's professional structure, a connected 3-tier pathway designed to support competition, promotion and relegation, and growth across more communities. So USL Premier, which is the new league, national table, launching in 2028, top tier of men's pathway, right? So we are still 2 years away from the launch of the First Division. We'll come to the number of teams and plans in a second. USL Championship Division 2, national table, balanced schedule, more than 15 years of highly competitive pro soccer. That's just like a brag. They're like, oh, we've had a league that's lasted 15 years.
They needed another bullet point for the slide. I've been there.
USL League One, regional format. That's intriguing. Local rivalries, national footprint. Now, those don't have to be in tension with one another. You need to explain it to me, though. So, Rob, give me some details on each one of these competitions.
So per the USL's announcement, the USL Premier will operate as a single national table with a long-term target of 20 clubs and is scheduled to launch in 2028.
Okay, what do we think long-term target means? How long is long-term, Rob? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? How long is long in this case?
I would say 5 to 10 years is probably the timeline here. Because, we're already talking about 2 years to start. And as we tried to put together a list on Monday of 12 teams, and that got a little scant and thin. And so if we're trying to get to 20, there's a lot of teams that need to be born or need to build a stadium or expand their current stadium. There's a whole lot of in-betweens for a lot of different clubs and cities to be prepared to meet this USL Premier or First Division standards. Like after those first 4 or 5 that we, teams and locations, it gets a little thin. So getting 12 in 2 years seems like a challenge. Getting up to 20, that's a whole kettle of fish.
it sounds thin if you are following directly along with the professional league standards as they currently exist. And I will continue to throw out this caveat, right? And I talked about this on the radio yesterday when we covered this story, me and Eric Winalda, who's very much for all of what USL is doing. And I am too, with the with a bit of an asterisk in that I want to see the proof in the pudding. I'm not just going to assume all this is going to go the way that they plan it. When you say thin, that means, okay, well, 75% of the teams in the league have to be in metropolitan areas of 1 million people or more, right? That's not incredibly difficult to get to. It's just something you have to consider. 15,000 seat stadium capacities are mandated by the professional league standards. That is a tougher lift when you look around the country and you look at the various teams that USL currently has in place. Now, this is just off the top of my dome this morning with Rob's help, with Jenny's help, trying to figure out what this might look like. In fact, you know what? I realized that this is not my complete list. Anyway, there is like green, where we think a team will meet all the standards and have a stadium big enough. We have yellow, where it's, oh yeah, maybe, probably. Are they going to be a team that really wants to be in first division soccer in the USL? And then the blues are kind of like, I don't know, like maybe they could get there. What, they got to have a stadium plan in a place like Vegas or a place like Phoenix. A place like San Antonio doesn't have enough seats in their building. So again, this is like, can they do it? Yes. Is it easy? I don't think so. And just because it says long term, and we know the PLS requires 12 teams in year 1 and 14 teams by year 3, if the PLS stays where it's at, then there won't be any relegation from the first division for a while if they're aiming to get to 20 teams, Rob. It'll just be promotion from USL Championship. And then again, building out USL League One so you can promote from there, but you just get this bulk of teams. I mean, I imagine that based on that regional element and the local rivalries and trying to minimize costs for League One teams, and we've seen it in the Pacific Northwest, right? They've already got Boise popping up. They've got Spokane. They want to put a team in Eugene. They want to put a team in Medford possibly, or they're kicking the tires on that with the Medford City Council. Like, you can see that they're trying to pod this at USL League One. So we're talking, what, 30, 40 teams maybe, ultimately long-term in their dreams for USL League One?
Yeah, I think it would be something like that. That is intriguing, that the part of this release of information, or at least plans, is that regionalization of League One, because whenever we've had any sort of a conversation about League One and what we think of the future, it's basically like regionalization is needed. So obviously the folks in the league office are obviously working towards that same thing, and kind of looks like they're trying to create footprints a la USL League Two. Obviously, there's a huge amount of USL League Two teams, but there's divisions in certain pockets all across the country. Some divisions have to have travel farther, but they do try to coagulate them or collect them in certain pockets. But yeah, so the plan is 20 in the top tier, 20 in the championship, and then seemingly an unlimited amount of teams in the regionalized League One.
Yeah, and I think that there is something to be said for the barrier to entry at the League One level being relatively low, although we've already caught wind of some problems down there, right? But the barrier to entry to enter League One, which is professional soccer, being relatively low, so that you can have teams in places that you wouldn't otherwise expect there to be a professional sports operation, right? We've seen this again, Medford, Oregon. I'm going to keep coming back to that because it's been in the news recently and we covered that story. Did you know there was a place called Medford, Oregon before we covered that story, Rob?
I did not know there was a place called Medford, Oregon. I even had a Freudian slip about Medford, New Jersey during that story.
We're not talking, like, it's not to say that Medford doesn't matter. It's just that for us, whether we're East Coast guys, Midwest guys, or just big population center guys, or Medford just doesn't bubble up into our attention, right? Like, that's not a town that we would need to know about, but it could potentially support a League One team rather in the USL. Now, there are lots of things with the PLS, and I'm seeing people talk about the PLS. And yes, we will acknowledge the idea, the notion, the argument that the PLS were written to protect Major League Soccer. Let's just toss that out there. It's there. People want to say it. Fine. It's on the record. If you have PLS in place right now, will U.S. Soccer amend them? Right? We talked about that as a possibility throughout this year that we've been following this story. Is USL in direct conversation with US Soccer about amending the professional league standards? If you don't amend the professional league standards, what kind of waivers are you going to get from US Soccer for USL Premier, potentially for the USL Championship, and even for League One, in the sense that, there may be some things about the size of not the size of the markets, but maybe time zone, like various things that are in there. I think time zones is mainly a first division issue, but what will you get waivers for? Stadium size certainly is a question, because I'm seeing a lot of people say, most teams can't draw 15,000. Why do they need a 15,000 seat stadium? Why are you choking off the potential interest in a professional soccer team by saying, well, you can't have one in that division unless you have 15,000 seats in your stadium? And again, I said this, I think, on another show. What you don't want is teams leaving a small soccer stadium that better fits their needs for a bigger non-soccer stadium just to meet a 15,000 seat standard. That would be not a good thing in my mind. So the other part of this, which obviously is the most complicated part of this, is when teams go up and down and it changes the configuration of clubs, and you lose a team that meets the standard to the second division, and a team that comes up from the second division doesn't meet the standard. Is there an automatic waiver? Is there something U.S. Soccer is going to put into place? They should. Let's be honest. They should do that if they're not going to get in the way of promotion and relegation. And again, the reason this can happen is because USL is in control nominally, because it's a league and these clubs operate underneath them with their agreement with USL. This is all an enclosed system, right? This is all a bubble that USL is in control of. If US Soccer says, no, you can't do pro rel, well, we'll be straight into court, won't we? I don't know I don't think that's a possibility. I think US Soccer is not going to get in the way of this. But if they're not going to get in the way, then they have to open up the possibility that these leagues might not meet the PLS every season.
Yeah, definitely hope that there's some very lengthy and deep-reaching conversations and outreach going between USL and USSF regarding those waivers and the PLS requirements. Like, just you're talking about they were set up. The PLS requirements were set up about 10 years ago. Speculation that those were set up to protect MLS at the time. And it's funny that we're now talking about them now, and this whole new USL. USL is a completely different entity, or at least their goals seem to be a lot different than 10 years ago. And will those framework of those PLS be applied 10 years later to a landscape that doesn't align at all when they were originally created? I sure hope so. I think this whole master plan, this grandiose plan, kudos for, we'll get to the things that overlooked in a moment, but kudos to USL for these big, bold plans in order to do a whole new endeavor. Adding 3 tiers, adding a whole new league, adding a whole new system that's foreign to the country. That's a big, big endeavor. And hopefully the rules, the pro league standards can be amended, because having to work in that restrictive framework for a fluid system, it's like kind of an oil and water. So I don't think that one can even really exist. Like, if there isn't any waivers or amendments coming to those pro league standards, this might be a short run or a much more complicated adventure than we'd all like. Do we want to talk about some of our some of the pieces of information yet to be disseminated, or do we want to kind of speculate on these first year teams? I did see a comment from Soccer Night in Detroit saying that Sports Business Journal saying they're going to bring up 8 teams from the championship and look outside the ecosystem for others. Interesting.
Well, outside the meaning clubs that or potential clubs, expansion teams, I guess, is maybe what that's about. I mean, because again, like, it just makes sense. And I know people already there are some people already who are true believers in pro rel who are saying you can't just name the teams for the first division. They've got to earn it. Now, how you make that happen? You play a tournament? Do you do a point total for the last 3 years?
Blood sport, Jason. Blood sport.
What are you doing exactly? There are some other things, by the way, in Paul Tenorio's piece at The Athletic on this news dropping, including some quotes from Paul McDonough, who we have a request out to get somebody from USL. Now, remember, they hired Tony Scholes. He's an Englishman to come over and run all this stuff. He will be the the guy leading the USL Premier launch. He doesn't start until the summer when he is done with his responsibilities in England.
Is that a problem?
I don't know. I mean, again, they're 2 years out from launching this league. He should have time to get things underway. But, it is something to be mentioned. Paul McDonough saying we're trying to look out the next 5 to 7 years toward building a 3-tiered integrated system linked together by promotion and relegation. We want to try to build towards this structure over the next 5 to 7 years, and then we have enough runway to see how the country evolves, what the ecosystem is like, and we'll evaluate as we go. Now, that you can't lock this down and say we're definitely doing this and we're definitely doing that. Things are going to change, people.
Yeah, it's that Band-Aid ripping on and off here, losing, gaining. It's gonna be
one
messy.
thing you have to wonder about, and there are ambitious clubs who are well-funded who will probably be fine. But there may be clubs who find that USL Premier is a real tough lift for them, right? Like there's a lot of money that we're spending now. And are we making enough money to justify this? Everybody I expect will be significantly in the red, at least initially, right? Because you don't know exactly what your costs are going to be. Remember, and this is something that has come up again as we see this news drop. Remember that USL and their agreement with their clubs is there's no money trickling down from the national organization to the clubs. The broadcast money doesn't trickle down, right? You're still paying significant fees to stay in the league or to expand into the league, right? You're basically paying the USL for the privilege of playing under their banner and being organized into the league. And that's about it. That's about it. George is pointing out that every club's in the red. That's probably every club is in the red. But again, I think there's a stomach for how much red, right? It's a matter of how dark is that red. And I'm not saying that any clubs are definitely going to fold or self-relegate, but that's already happened, right? And I don't know, like, again, you're getting everybody to sign off on this, but you don't know exactly how it's going to go until you're doing it. So,
yeah, we're in Wild West territory here. I mean, as long as I feel like, at least in our chairs, I mean, it's harder for those of fans of clubs that are in the mix here to be laissez-faire there. But I mean, I think that we're going to see some people or some clubs that are a lock fade away, and then maybe some unexpected cities and clubs hop into the mix. And I think that it's just gets definitely until the full engine is running, this interim period of building up and populating the clubs before the pro rel system is even saying that we're talking 5-10 years before the actual pro rel bit of this actually engages. And a whole lot of coming and going could happen in that time.
Yeah, it's not exactly clear when the pro rel piece will kick in. Right?
Because if I'm reading it right, it almost seems like they're going to operate until the first division gets to 20 teams and then engage it. But that's an assumption.
Yeah, that's just, well, like I said, you could do, we're launching with 12 teams, or we're launching with whatever teams we have ready, which isn't 20. And as the years go by, the USL Championship sends up 2 teams every year to populate to 20, and then you start with relegation from USL Premier. But again, I don't know. And again, there is this idea of like, will there be championship clubs who are starting in League One for whatever reason? Or will it only be League One clubs now, and then you continue to populate the map with new clubs to fill up League One? Under current plans, the USL intends for both USL Premier and the USL Championship to operate with 20 teams. USL League One will be then a national league that competes regionally. And I guess that means you'll have divisions and then there'll be playoffs, I'm assuming, because you can't do a balanced schedule if you're doing regional competition with more than 20 teams. But the top 2 divisions will be 20 teams and do a balanced schedule. And I'm assuming it doesn't say no playoffs for USL Championship and USL Premier, Rob, but if they're doing a balanced schedule, your argument could be because of Pro Rel, we should just be doing a single table and determining everything by that metric. And then are you then, I'm not saying that you have to do playoffs, but there are very few professional American sports leagues who are like, you know what, playoffs, we don't need them. So that's interesting.
How much hair will we have on our heads by the time we get to these scenarios? I mean, an American soccer pro rel playoff sounds like edge of the seat entertainment that I can't wait to engage with. but I mean, we could be a long way off here indeed.
Yeah.
And elephant in the room, there should be one thing noted within this conversation yet. With all these grand plans, there is a labor impasse going on at the same time.
Yes, there is that. And we did touch on, we have touched on that a little bit recently, but just to kind of catch you up, the USL Players Association did take to their Instagram account to make some pretty pointed comments about this, and they did use the hashtag gaslighting. Just saying that, reporting that. They used the hashtag gaslighting. I know we're going to be moving on here in a second. Again, from Paul Tenorio's piece at The Athletic, the likely plan for promotion and relegation would see 2 teams go up and down when the league launches with 12 or 14 teams. Again, still some details to be sorted out. Once the USL Premier is at a full 20 teams, it will likely transition to 3 teams up and 3 teams down. Details will be discussed with owners in February. Again, the steps left, USL still has to go through a process, including finalizing pro rel plans and working with U.S. Soccer on the Pro League standards so that teams getting promoted are able to meet those requirements. USL Premier will operate alongside MLS as a first division U.S. outfit. And again, you know, that those elements are still a little bit unclear. So while this is movement, Rob, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of substance here. It's just kind of giving us, you know, again, giving us an idea of how many teams will be in the leagues is fine, without identifying those teams or even knowing how many teams ultimately have applied for first division status or where they might be looking at expansion, because that is again mentioned in Paul's piece, just like you brought to us here from the other story. You know, it's kind of tough to know what's going to go down here.
And the story only just beginning here. USL's top division to be called USL Premier, and we have a couple breadcrumbs of what those leagues and that structure will look like. But of course, the conversation rages on. Feel free to comment and throw your 2 cents in. Who should be in year 1 for USL Premier, and how should the Pro Rel system work? And what is your estimated timeline for these leagues to fill up to 20 and for the final system of Pro Rel to engage in the United States? Thank you to our channel members for joining into the conversation. This is an open conversation, interactive show. Me, Jason, you, subscribers, viewers, members. This is the American Soccer Conversation. Support, tell a friend, become a member, and try to elevate the show to the highest level possible.